Welcome to the Haunted Hangover podcast. I'm Louie, and in this episode, I'm joined by a special guest, a new friend, Mike from Whiskey Morgue. Welcome to the show, sir.
Louie, how's it going, brother?
What's going on, man? It's good. Holiday season, the stress.
I felt, yeah. Dude, stress is definitely on the menu for the holiday season. That's for sure.
It's like you get like the Halloween season, which starts in like August now at this point. And then you got Thanksgiving and Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate right afterwards, and New Year. It's too much. It's too much to balance creating content like this, working on other projects, life, family, friends, presents. It's crazy, man. It's always chaotic.
I feel like coming out of the like obviously you and I would be the same thing. Coming out of Halloween season, there's this expectation and pressure to pump out more content, to be more creative, and then I feel like I have like a week at best where I have a chance to breathe, and then it's right back into it with the holiday season, whether it be content, life, all of that stuff.
Yeah, man, it's weird because I love doing this, and I know you love doing what you do, and we're gonna get into that in a sec. But every now and then, man, you get that burnout. You need to take a week off and watch some TV in your underwear and like catch up on movies and shows. And I definitely did that because I needed.
But it doesn't count unless you're actually in your underwear. Like it has to be.
You have to be in your underwear.
Yeah,
it doesn't count. You have to be full blown Al Bundy mode to really to be peak laziness in between projects. But yes, that's enough talking about us in our underwear and being lazy. Let's talk a little bit about Miss Whiskey Morgue.
Let's do it.
Tell the Haunted Hangover listeners, what exactly is Whiskey Morgue?
I mean, at its core, it's pairing what I drink, which is predominantly whiskey, with what I'm watching, and it's 99% of the time horror. Do you want me to go into like how it started?
Yeah, how did that start? I am curious because I don't even know this information. How did you start? Like, what inspired you? Because I know there is sort of I don't think scene is the right word to use, but I know there are like accounts and YouTubers and things like that sort of dabble in horror and alcohol or spirits. Funny enough, when I started Haunted Hangover, that was something I wanted. That's where the Haunted Hangover came from initially. But I'm not smart enough to understand flavors and taste and things like that when it comes to alcohol of any. No, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good drink. But I've never been, even with like beers, I do drink beer as well. Yeah. I've never been able to like sit there and go, oh man, this has notes of this, that, and the third. I just don't think my brain functions that way. So whenever I see someone like you and, other people that do something similar, I'm always quite envious because I'm like, wow, they know what they're talking about. If I had to describe a whiskey, I'd be like, it's strong.
You know what, dude? A lot of it is, I'll tell you right now, a lot of it's, I don't want to say faking it, but when I got into feeling the expectation to like not just pair but talk about like the whiskey and the notes and all of that, there was I read reviews or watch reviews and it'd be like, this tastes like grandma's blueberry pie, and I'm like, fuck you, it does. And I'm like it doesn't taste like that. And I usually was just like, yo, this is really good. Or it's like there was certain, people always say, oh, I got vanilla and I got caramel and like that stuff, but I mean, with some experience,
pie. Whiskey and blueberry pie. I don't think I've ever had a whiskey that tastes like a blueberry pie. I wish I did, but no.
But I think a lot of it just becomes like, what do you associate it with it mentally? And like, the more I did it, and the more I kind of just like, I would smell something and be like, yo, this reminds me, like the nose, maybe like there's a hint of it that reminds you of a dessert I once had, right? Maybe not the blueberry pie, but like, if I was like, oh, this reminds me of like more of like an apple pie and ice cream, like there's like those elements. But yeah, I feel like, I always say like I offer tasting notes, but like in the end, they don't really matter. And I actually don't like sometimes imposing that on people and being like, here's what you should look for, because you know what, you might sit there and be like, I love this pour and I can't fucking pick out a note, but
Yeah.
it's great. And that's awesome. So I don't like getting too highbrow with.
You don't want to become too pretentious now with your,
Yeah.
you want to enjoy it as well.
Yeah. So the whole reason that this got started was that, like, in complete honesty, I had an extensive whiskey collection. I was just into mostly bourbon, different types of whiskeys. And I was like, you know what? I see people online who have the same bottles as me. I have like a decent collection. If I start taking pictures of them, maybe people will ship me free whiskey. Like that was like the core. And for like a year, I would always like be with like friends or like, you know, mention to my wife and be like, I could start an Instagram and get free shit. Like I have all these bottles, like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to whiskey. But my wife's like, yeah, but you never do it. Like you don't actually put out anything and you just talk about it.
Yeah.
You talk out your ass for a year and like you haven't posted anything. And she's like, start something. And she kind of lit a fire under my ass because she was like, you know, what do you do when you drink whiskey? Like, cause I'm like, I need an angle. I don't want to just take pretty pictures. I'm not really a photographer to begin with. Like that's kind of like been fake it till you make it so far with what I do. But we kind of sat down and she was like, look, Friday night, your jam is like you put on a horror movie, you kind of stare at your bar for 20 minutes and decide what you're going to drink. And you sit down and you enjoy that drink. So like, what's the connection between what you're drinking and what you're watching? And I was like, well, shit. Yeah. Okay. Like maybe this can be my angle, but I was like, that's super niche. And I don't know if I'm pigeonholing myself by doing that. So, I don't know if you can see to the side of me, to my right, there's like the Funko Pop, like the countdown calendar to Halloween.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
So in like in 2020, she got me one and she was like, here's your homework. Every day you're going to pick out the character and then write a small blurb as to, you know, how it would pair with a certain whiskey. And it was like a really good boot camp because I would just like pull up the character, try to think of a bottle I have, kind of find some kind of connection. So that kind of put me through the ringer. And I was like, I enjoy this. And, you know, I teach English by day. So I'm an English teacher. And I always said I wanted a creative outlet to write. So here I was, like, originally I was like, well, I just want to post whiskey, but now I'm really enjoying like what I'm pairing what I'm watching with what I'm drinking. And I feel like slowly it kind of evolved into the simplicity of like, before I thought I had to do like really creative pictures too. And I had the Funko Pops, but then it was just like, here's what's on my TV. Here's the bottle. Here's the glass. This is what I'm doing right now. And here's my blurb.
I appreciate the minimalist approach. Sometimes you don't need everything to be oversaturated, bright colors. Like I know that's a big thing when people take pictures, especially when you're trying to promote something, and especially in the horror realm or even in the nostalgia community, that's a big thing. And I'm not knocking it. I get it. But you know, even someone like me who I've watched all your videos, I enjoy what you're doing. I like I like how you have your TV set up. You have the bottle, the drink, you know, the way you kind of place everything. The minimalist approach is so effective, especially it comes off as almost classy. And I don't mean, again, going back to that word, it's not pretentious, but it seems real. It doesn't seem like you're putting on a show. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I that was like a worry I had before too, because like, you know, you see, you know, again, not to knock other accounts, you see some accounts that have like your TV's like engulfed by every piece of memorabilia ever. And I'm like, I don't know, like there's like my wife's into horror too, but there's only so much I can get away with. Like there's parts of the house. I have like my music room where I am now where I can like play around, but like, like, you know, I was almost like, is it too minimalist? You know, it's very clean in terms of like the setup, but then I've kind of come to appreciate.
Yeah, man.
And I feel better that you too enjoy it. But just that like the clean aesthetic of like, I feel like the focus really is just the screen, the bottle, and that's it. There's kind of no other distractions.
And honestly, even with your merch and stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into that, the minimalist approach, even with me nowadays, and this goes down to everything almost, especially when it comes to the horror scene and the way sometimes there's too much going on.
Yeah.
when either t-shirts, toys, Blu-ray covers, sometimes there's too much shit. And it's like, it's nice when some brands take a more minimalist approach because it does separate you from everything else. You know, we don't need you to stand there with your TV, 50 skulls, or, and you watching a movie with the bottle, the glass, like, it works. And again, I appreciate it. I do. I think that's what makes you stand out next to some of the other, I guess, alcohol horror-based brands and accounts. In my opinion, this is Louie's opinion, so don't go after Mike. This is me saying this, so come after me. So, But
it's funny because, like, even when I think about, like, when you ask, like, where did it start? When I got the ball rolling, I was like, you know what? Then, like, here is my new writing project, and I know it was faux pas to like write long captions, and I still sometimes question like if I need to move that over to a website, but like I don't know. It's my jam. It's what I do. So. It started off as like a writing project where I was just like, I enjoy creative writing. It's kind of about the whiskey. Like I can sometimes nerd out about the whiskey. I can nerd out about the film. But what the moment I looked for was like people being like, damn, that's clever. Like that connection is super unique. Or how the hell did you come up with that? And I probably spend more time than I should, like researching the history of the whiskey and like looking for interesting facts about the movie. But then even then, the first year I was like, I want to be completely anonymous. I don't want to show my face. I just like people are going to know my account by seeing the TV and the bottle. And that didn't work out as planned either.
Never does, man. From experience here too. So that never works out because you realize you got to be in front of the camera, man, to get people to watch and want to see all the hard work you're putting into your project. So,
and that's where, like, when people ask me now, like, what is Whiskey Morgue or like, where is it heading? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, like in truth, like, I think there's two things that came out of this. Like, I enjoy my creative writing, and that's for sure. And I always thought, I'll get picked up to write, like, for instance, like for a whiskey magazine, or hopefully a horror magazine, but I didn't think it would be doing what I'm doing. I thought that this would just be a jumping point where, people would be like, I like your writing, but we don't want to hear you pair whiskey and horror. So, review this movie for me, or just review this whiskey solely. But like, and that's what I was here for. I was like, I'm going to nerd out doing my pairings, but I'm not going to make anything bigger than this because people won't want that. And how quickly that turned around was super wild for me. And, like one of the first interviews I did was with Ben from Fright Rags. And, I remember commenting, I tagged him in something and he commented about the whiskey bottle, and it was an obscure bottle. And I was like, shit, Ben, you know what you're talking about here. Like this, like the average person doesn't know this bottle. And sure enough, we start talking and he's like, dude, like I collect whiskey. And I find out that he nerds out just as much as I do. And then we get into this thing where we're like trading whiskey samples with each other and sending them off to each other. So it was like cool that like I never thought there'd be a place for that in the community. I thought either I had to go full out horror or full out whiskey, but here I was kind of like towing the line and thinking that I'll never get to really like make this something bigger than what it was. I'll just be the ominous writer behind the TV and the bottle. And that was it. And then it just kept evolving and evolving. But, for me right now, the biggest thing is doing something like this with yourself. It's cool that there's such a community around this stuff. And, I think in our short conversation, you and I haven't really, other than DMs, sliding each other's DMs, like we haven't really had this, but like, I don't like gatekeeping. I don't like people being pretentious. So I'm all about like, you jump in wherever you're comfortable. Some people are more into whiskey. Some people are more into horror. And, I don't care if you know every stat about the movie or, every detail about the whiskey. Like it's about community. And when people are like, you know what, hell yeah, I enjoy your account because like, I enjoy coming home on Friday and throwing on a horror movie and having a drink. That's my time to unwind. And they can relate to that. Then that's what I'm here for. It's like, I realize like meeting people and realizing that there's more of a community than I thought to begin with, and kind of people bonding over that and just making friends on here.
And you also shoot videos where you're front and center, right? And you're doing more, because I've seen a couple of videos, and even what you did for the Haunted Hangover Halloween special this year.
Yeah.
You know, those videos, even, you know, side by side with your other videos where you pair the drink and the TV and stuff together, those are really well done too. You do a good job, kind of, you know, that's where you're front and center. You know,
yeah. So that was
yeah.
weird too, because like, so I got the gig, like I do like Horror on the Rocks with Rue Morgue TV.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was like a lifelong dream for me to write for Rue Morgue. And I know they're from Toronto. So
yeah,
I was like, maybe it helps her in my own backyard. And again, like maybe they'll see, you know, some of my writing and say, you know, review horror movies for us. And then I got talking with the chief editor, Andrea Subasati, and I was like, here, let me send you, like, she was interested in what I was doing, which I was already shocked. And I was like, let me send you some of my writing. And she was like, dude, I think this would be way better in video format. And I was like, oh, wait, you mean like me talking to a camera? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, no, like when I was doing this, I'm supposed to be ominous. Mike, dude, like I want to be like the best description. We're both wrestling fans. Like I want to be like the Undertaker, kind of like
in the shadows.
In the shadows, like super mysterious. You know, I love bands who wear masks. I love like wrestlers who wear masks or like have a minimal identity. And I'm like, I love writing, and you know, it's not that I'm not comfortable because I teach by day. So like, I can talk to people, but the idea of sitting down in front of a camera was super daunting. And
it's two different things, man.
Talking like, in front of a class and interacting. No,
public speaking and being in front of a camera and like someone hitting record and lights, it's very different. I know exactly what you mean. Even for me, you know, I was never in front of the camera. Like I'm a director at heart. Like I was always a behind the camera guy. So for me to eventually, much like you, be front and center on my brand, it was a little awkward at first, but you know, you kind of get used to it and it just becomes second nature. And it seems like with you come off very natural. So it's not like awkward or weird or anything, you know? So.
I always thank the editors, like the team. So it's like a small team there, but like the first time I walked in, dude, I actually at one point while recording, so I walk in and I'm like, finally I get to visit Rue Morgue, and they have like memorabilia all over the wall and just cool artifacts. And Andrea's sitting there, she's like, I just want to watch you record. And they have their team, they have sound, video, and I'm like sweating, and it's like there's lights on you. And the first couple times I couldn't even make it through the first sentence. And they were like, dude, drink some of your whiskey, chill out, use some of your social lube there, and you're gonna be fine. And it's funny because like you said that now, like when I go in there, I know the team, they're amazing. I even got to know like the editors in Thailand. So like he's from here, but they send stuff out to him, and you know, getting to talk to him and knowing like what he's looking for when he's editing. You know, I've done a few videos now, but I feel like I'm a little bit more of a well-oiled machine in terms of what to expect when going in there.
You kind of create a format in your head, right? Like you kind of create, like you already know how you're going to start and how you're going to end everything. It's kind of just a puzzle you put together, and you kind of over time it just becomes second nature. It's kind of weird how that works, right? Like how that, especially with creating
I know my
stuff.
Format. I know that I want it to be like punchy. That it's a lot of video clips. It's a lot of like quick to the point. Like I don't want to go off on tangents. But there's like these nuanced things too that I'm sure you would understand. Like Steven messaged me the other day, the editor, and he's like, dude, when you mess up and you take your breath, don't glance at like Ashley who's doing video right away. It's like, because when I cut, I keep getting your eyes to the side. So he's like, stare at the camera, pause. But learning all of this is so foreign to me. And it almost, I always say this, and it's not to like, you know, I feel like an imposter all the time because I'm like, how am I doing this? How am I like doing this ridiculousness of pairing horror and whiskey? And I always wanted to write for Rue Morgue. It was a lifelong dream growing up writing. And here I am, and they're like, we want you front and center in a video. And I'm like, this feels so wrong. Like it's amazing, but it was like a learning curve, and it felt like a bit of that like imposter syndrome too. But it's been nice because I feel like, again, community validates that, you know, people are enjoying it. And I had someone message me the other day who was like, she's like, I don't drink, but I love your content. And I was like, that is the best compliment you could give me, because she was like, I feel like on both ends, you don't seem like you're being pretentious or gatekeeping with the whiskey or horror. And for me, who doesn't know about, I don't know about whiskey. She's like, I enjoy horror, but she said she's felt intimidated in the community before too, in terms of like how hard can you deep dive into facts and whatnot. And she's like, I really enjoy your content. And I was like, that was the best compliment, because it's coming from someone who doesn't drink whiskey. Like, why are you watching Horror on the Rocks or Whiskey Morgue content and you don't even drink whiskey? So that was like the best compliment probably I've ever received.
That is a good compliment. You're reeling people in that don't even drink booze, so that's always a good thing, man. So, and with whiskey, what is it about whiskey that you love so much? I know that's a really basic question, but why do you? I know you probably drink other stuff too, but what is it about whiskey that you collected bottles over time, and what is it about it specifically that you love?
So in retrospect, I wish I went with IPA beer cans, because dude, it would be a lot less expensive than the whiskey side. I'm envious of the beer accounts, but I started off with like, I drank beer, I drank a lot of rum, I drank a lot of like dirty stuff, and I still do time to time. Again, not a snob. But it started with bourbon. So it was this fascination that, like, I remember me and my brother, we went to a bar, we had a drink, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was like Bullet bourbon or something. I had like an old fashioned. I wasn't drinking McNeed at the time. I was like, this tastes really good. And then I just kind of like looked it up, and learning about like the legislation that goes into bourbon in terms of like how strict it is and like how thorough the process is. It felt like really, like, it's going to sound super hipster, but like really like handcrafted. Like, you can't add anything to the barrel. Each barrel has to be brand new, charred oak. You're really taking like, agriculture, distilling it down, putting it in a charred barrel that was lit on fire, letting it sit for 10 years, and then hopefully it turns out pretty good. So it was this idea of like the craftsmanship, but then bourbon was cool because it was like the poor man's whiskey. Not so much anymore. Things have changed. So I started off in like 2015, but there was these bottles that were like $60. And I was like, these drink comparable to a lot of like these like high-end scotches and whatnot. So I was like, oh, it's affordable to collect bourbon. And I kind of like these backstories, and they were kind of, steeped in lore of like, how did they originate? And as an English major, I was like all there for to give me more of that backstory, what happened historically and how this came to be. And some of it's true. Some of it you find out later is bullshit. But I think it started off with the whiskey and really just being like this idea of like super as like authentic and crafted as you can get, and affordable. So again, it's changed big time now. Bottles I used to pick up for like $50. It's a pretty manly drink too. It's a manly, it's a manly drink. I don't have too much machismo, but
listen, man, you have machismo. You're drinking bourbon and whiskey straight. So, at this point in my life, man, whenever I fuck around with whiskey, it's usually a rough morning the next day. So I got to be very honest. What would be for a guy like me who would drink whatever, 25-year-old Louie would throw down Jack Daniels and like throw down like, what's the other one? Evan Williams, whatever.
There's a Jim Beams, Evan Williams.
Jim Beam, get hit with all that stuff. What would be a good bottle? Obviously reasonably priced. I don't want to drop $250 on a bottle of whiskey. But what would be a good place to start that's not those brands? And just to kind of sip, and you have to create the whole like ice ball thing, right? That's like a thing. This is foreign to me. So
okay. We'll do a Louis pairing here.
There you go.
The thing is, like, I drink neat usually now, just because like I've been drinking it for a while. So I find like if I'm really kind of like picking apart the flavors in this preference, but there's some times where like I just want to throw it on a big thing of ice, just because flavors change when it sits on ice or the water.
That's how I've only had it, by the way. I've never had, like, I don't think I've ever had a glass of, it's always been with ice, always.
Yeah.
And even I think water at one point. So.
Yeah, and that's where I started too, right? I think like, and again, I come back to it, but it opens up flavors big time where it's really a nice experiment to start off with something, sip it neat. It's usually hotter, it's going to be, if it's a higher proof. And then you add a little bit of water. What do you think of it with a little bit of water? And maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Then you add a bit more water or an ice cube. And like, obviously it kind of dilutes it a bit, but then you get like a lot more, I find like, the citrusy flavors that come out. But it's definitely like there's no right way to drink. I always say like, you drink it however you want, unless you're taking expensive ass whiskey and throwing it in a Coke.
I'm sure there's people that do that. So
yeah. But yeah. So anyways, for you, I think like a bottle that got me kind of like onto like better stuff, and it's still a big name, but it hasn't been impacted too much. And I think people sleep on it because it was a bigger name, but Four Roses, they have a bottle called Small Batch Select. So they have like a regular small batch. I think in the US, it's like 35, 40 US.
Okay.
But like Small Batch Select is like, I think 55 US. So
not bad.
yeah. Like, but what's crazy is that in like blind tastings, it compares to a lot of like higher end drinks. And again, that brings me back to why I fell in love with bourbon, is that like it being affordable, accessible, and not being so like snobbish, right? So, I think like for $55, like it ticks every box that I like in like a solid bourbon. It's a little bit higher proof. I think it's like 53%, like 106 proof. Okay. I want to say. So like it packs a little bit of a punch. So you can sip on it, or you can throw it in with like, again, some water or the rocks. But to me, that's a solid bottle that, funny enough, I feel like it keeps coming up now. Like in the bourbon universe or whiskey universe, people start chasing all these crazy rare bottles. And I'm sure like when I see people with VHS tapes, if we're creating a horror parallel, like you can deep dive so hard into that. But, it's nice to kind of come back and you're like, yo, I can buy this bottle on the shelf right now for $55. And it's just as good as some of the shit that you're chasing and overpaying for. And this is like a reminder as to why did you fall in love with this to begin with.
I like that, man. That's a good way of kind of putting it, with just like you don't always have to spend an arm and a leg to get something of quality. Because even like if you don't know anything about bourbon, it's always good to, most people that are not, I guess, into it wouldn't know where to start. They'd be like, oh, okay, it's going to be nasty. It's not going to taste good. So it's good to kind of just gauge what would be good for somebody when they're starting out, sipping on it, because that's what you're going to do. So
I think like what's been eye-opening is doing the horror on the rocks thing has been fantastic for me. Aside from like, yes, okay, I get the opportunity to do this video content. I'm working with Rue Morgue. But it kind of brought me back to like, how do you make it accessible again for people? And, for like people who follow me who are like deep, like super steep into the whiskey side, I'm sure they have comments like, why are you doing this bottle? And like, that's not the best. And I'm like, but if we're looking at a mass audience, some people might be new to it. They might be curious. And, it's easy to kind of find yourself in a really obscure corner of the internet where, people are there and they're like, yeah, I know everything about whiskey too. And I know all these brands, but you're like, yeah, Louie's like, you know what? I want to try to sit down and appreciate a drink.
Exactly.
Where can I start? So, and that's why I started moving into other alcohol too with that show, because I was like, if I'm going to do this like long term, until they tell me to stop, am I just going to do whiskey? Now there's different variations. There's Scotch, there's rye, then you can get into like whatever, Canadian whiskey, but not everybody wants to drink whiskey as well. So now am I going to segregate that audience because I'm like, yo, you drink gin or you drink vodka? And at one point I drank all of this stuff, and I still sometimes do. I don't go to parties and they're like, oh, we're serving these drinks and we have vodka. I'm like, fuck you. Where's the whiskey? I'm not drinking.
I want my whiskey. I want my bourbon. Get that vodka away.
I have my briefcase.
You pull out a glass. Imagine you show up to the party with a glass, like a little suitcase with like your own glass. That'd be amazing. That'd be hilarious. I'm sure those people exist. Get your what's a big vodka? Ciroc vodka? I don't even know. Yeah, there you go.
But like,
get that out of here.
The last episode hasn't come out yet. It should be out soon for Rue Morgue. I was pairing vampire films, and I think one of them I paired a red wine, and I was like,
Oh yeah.
"Yo, I drink wine too, man. Like I drink like
man.
on Sundays when the family gets together, I drink some wine." So I'm just like, I'm really trying to have fun with it and open it up. And again, like, although I am Whiskey Morgue, and that's still that like identity on my corner of the internet and like on Instagram, I do really want to open it up to everybody again who, if you want to enjoy any kind of drink and watch a movie. I've even talked about like on future episodes, I want to do mocktails, man. Like people who don't drink or like enjoy something like the cocktail and they just don't regardless if they just don't feel like drinking that day or they, have quit drinking. Like again, like why alienate people? I want to have everyone involved. So that's something that like I'd like to explore awesome. As well. So
that's really cool. That's cool because you can easily have, like Dave here, who's part of Haunted Hangover. He's never had alcohol his entire life. But if you give him a mocktail, he'll drink it. There's no booze in it. So he's straight edge. He's very proud. So
yeah.
But he'll have like a Shirley Temple or something. If you give him like some sort of mocktail, he'll enjoy it. So there are a lot of people that don't drink booze, and I respect that too. That's cool, So that is a good idea for you to kind of delve into that world of mocktails and even me, I've tried with the cocktail videos. I do them from time to time. And again, it goes
I saw
back
a bit
to
when I scrolled in the down in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough, man. You got to have a real knowledge for this stuff. And I'm trying to teach myself. I'm trying little by little, to teach like what flavors go with what.
What's funny about that too is that I was also intimidated because, with doing the Horror on the Rocks or trying to like grow my content, I was like, well, let's offer like, here's the drink. Here's what I think of it. Here's the pairing. What can you do with it? Like in terms of a cocktail. And I was super scared at first because I'm like, I'm not a bartender. Like, yes, I make drinks sometimes at home, but I'm not a bartender. And, my wife being as great as she is in terms of like talking me off the ledge all the time. She's like, that's right. You're not a bartender. So you're the average person at home. Like put the drink together. The other, I don't know if you saw, I did that blackened whiskey reel.
Yeah.
And so she's pretty good, like on the fly cutting, like on the phone, like videos and whatnot. So she was like, okay, I'm going to film you doing everything. And I'll put it together and make it 20 seconds and make it look clean. And you could throw some music, write your caption. I was like, okay. So we start doing it. And she's like, okay, now stir. Like, what's the next step? You're going to stir it up? I'm like, yeah. And I think I put the spoon between like my fingers here. And I was trying to like, she's like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, I saw a video where like the bartender she's like, stop, like grab the spoon, like spin it around.
Yeah, that's funny.
But even I was like, oh, I need to look professional. Like, but I'm not, man. Like, and I have to like keep myself in check that like, as I explore these other things too, that like, yes, like, I guess like whiskey is my niche and I'm well versed in all of that stuff. But as I explore cocktails and stuff too, I'm throwing it together at home just like anybody else. So I guess to be a little bit more transparent about that is the way to go.
And with everything, like anything you're working on content wise, whether it's a podcast, videos, reels, TikTok, and I feel like especially this day and age, with what you're doing, what I'm doing, it evolves. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
People have shorter attention spans and you got to chop things up. So what you're doing works perfectly because you have kind of like the best of both worlds where you're doing kind of short format stuff and longer format stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, as you continue, you will just evolve more and more and do new things and figure you're on the right path, man. You're doing it. So that's the most important thing. It's a scary path
sometimes because you know what you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
And like even just exploring, like I said, different spirits and whatnot was kind of daunting because I was like, no, but I got comfortable. I'm the guy who can like find this obscure pairing and do something cool with it. And then trying to expand and evolve. And now I'm exactly where what you said is that I'm just like, you know what? This is a fun ride. Like just roll with it, see where it goes and enjoy it, man.
Yeah. That's all you can do when it comes to just putting yourself out there and putting all your work into all you want is someone to watch, enjoy what you're doing. Even if
That's
it's
it.
15 people, as long as they enjoy it and they
100%.
like what you're doing. So that's what's most important, and that you're having a good time. That's also very important.
100%.
You know we're a Halloween podcast, so I got to hit you with one quick question before we go. I know it's not the Halloween season right now, but
no, we got it.
It's always Halloween here.
I'm recovering post-Halloween blues, so hit me up.
There you go. So I want you to talk about Halloween a little bit. You know, your love for the holiday. Maybe hit us with a memory that's important to you from Halloween's past. Like what is it that you love about the holiday? Why is it important to you personally? And hit me with a memory.
Okay, so I mean, I grew up in a really large like Portuguese family, so I'm Portuguese and Italian. But I was really close with all my cousins, and I'm not the youngest, but I'm kind of like towards the younger side of the group. But I have like a few cousins who are older, and we'd get together, and I don't know. I asked my mom this the other day. I said, "Mom, like you're into horror a bit, but like not crazy. Like she watches the odd movie or whatever." I'm like,
yeah.
Why did we have so many random VHS tapes with like movies now that are like seem like deep cuts when I bring them up? I'm like, why did we have those in the basement? And why were we at like 7 years old watching them downstairs? Like, so we love the idea of like being scared, like watching these movies. The adults played into that too. So they'd be like, oh yeah, you want to go watch Child's Play in the basement? Cool. Like if you're scared tonight, that's on you. Like don't come to our bed, first of all.
You're on your own.
Further, like one of the, like they're upstairs. Like I made a post the other, like a couple weeks back about the adults literally being upstairs, having coffee, drinks, smoking cigarettes. And then one of them being like, look, I'm going to go scare them downstairs. And all of a sudden like we'd hear something in the background. So it kind of evolved, and we loved like making haunted houses, and we would do like, some of us would make the haunted house and you'd have to go through it. And it was like an essential part of like my childhood fabric and growing up. So naturally, like when Halloween came around, I almost had that like hipster mentality from young where I was like, oh, but not everyone's doing it. We do this all the time. Like we love scary movies and whatnot. But I would say like my greatest memory is always getting together and then including friends, like starting to go to school, find other kids who either their parents allow them to watch horror movies or corrupt the other kids who weren't even allowed to watch The Simpsons. And I bring them over and put on The Exorcist.
Traumatize them.
I probably messed up some kids. But,
yeah, for sure.
But even on the more innocent side, like I remember having the Goosebumps marathons and the Are You Afraid of the Dark marathons. And it was the idea of like building up to Halloween. They would like run those, leading up to it. And we would go to the store and pick out our snacks. And I talk about like the pairing element where obviously I wasn't looking to pair exactly, but you pick your favorite, bag of chips or your favorite drink. And we all got together and we binge watched whatever marathon was on. So it was like very early on, this idea of enjoying the thrill together and making an experience out of it. And I think like, when people ask me about favorite horror movies and stuff, like I think I sometimes overlook the Scream franchise. I love it. Like, don't get me wrong, but I just won't ever really mention it in like my top 5 or whatever. But I realized how instrumental it was into like my love for Halloween, because I remember going out when like the first one came out and me and my friends got the ghost face masks. 2 things. First of all, you could hit up a house twice because everybody had the mask on.
No one was keeping track.
no one was keeping track of which ghost face was
there. You can't.
But it kind of dawned on me where I was like, oh, this is why the movie's so effective, because when it became like, more meta in terms of like self-aware and all the people were wearing masks and, I was like, that's pretty scary. Like, you see, and the more of the newer ones did that with the subway where people have the mask on and who is it? And, I think like that's where it kind of dawned on me, like the idea of like the slasher, the masked slasher is pretty scary with like the Scream franchise. So kind of growing up with that made me gravitate towards more of those types of movies. And I find I kind of naturally went backwards into like the Halloweens and, Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, of course. And we're basically the same age. So that was in the 90s. And that's why I never shit on that franchise, whatever sequels are better than the others, regardless.
Yeah.
Because that was our franchise growing up.
Yeah.
You know, in the 90s, you had Scream 1, like Scream 2 came out a year or two after. And like you said, the mask was so prominent, you know, those Halloweens. You'd see it basically took over the bootleg Jason mask, like the hockey mask. It went from like everyone in the late 80s into the early 90s, everyone wore a hoodie with a really shitty hockey mask they bought at like, you know, Target or whatever store, discount, like whatever store they would go to. And then when Scream came out, Ghostface, that kind of pushed the Jason. Everyone forgot about it. Like, no one forgot, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, Ghostface was like the new shiny toy. So I get that. And I feel like for us, people that grew up in the 90s, those movies were important in kind of shaping us and what we liked. And I'm sure people older and maybe a little younger feel the same way. It's like you can't really, and I know people that are not huge fans of those movies that are around our age, maybe a little older, but still appreciate what they did with horror during that time. And I love how you mentioned everyone having a Ghostface mask on Halloween, because it goes to show there were probably kids that didn't even see the movie but knew what, you know, who Ghostface, or knew the mask, you know, what it came from. So that's always been cool. Same thing with Jason. I feel like,
and
Jason,
I think like when we talk about, because like we're on the same age, I know we're both into wrestling, right? Like for me, I kind of, you know, I've talked to you about like how jokingly I wanted to be the Undertaker when I started Whiskey Morgue again. Like, but there was a lot of overlap, I find, with like wrestling and horror too, right? So for me, you know, when there was those like funeral parlor segments, or like the Undertaker went missing, I was like, oh damn, where is he gonna show up next? Like, and then, you know, Ultimate Warrior's puking, and like, so for like this mysterious element, the Papa Shangos, the Stings coming down from the rafters, like it, all of that like really appealed to me. So I find like, you know, we talk about growing up, like me and my cousins, there was two things: we were making haunted houses or wrestling each other. Like that was
that was
it. Like,
man.
we made fake belts and we wrestled for them, or we made haunted houses. Like that was
I was literally in the same boat, man. Wrestling your cousins, your siblings, yourself, wrestle, take your wrestling buddy and beat him up and pile drive him, and then, you know, watch horror movies and make haunted houses. That's kind of just those three things definitely molded a lot of people in our age bracket that are into this stuff. So I totally see and totally understand. It's weird because when you talk to someone that's into all that stuff, it's like, you get it. You understand. You know, some people might be, oh, that's fucking corny, blah, blah, blah. Like, nah, you don't get it. You don't understand.
No, but that's why when I was introduced to your account, I was like, so he talks about horror, but the name's Haunted Hangover, and he incorporates booze time to time, and he also loves wrestling. I'm like, hell, like sign me up. Like this is like again, it's my childhood. It's everything I know that really like shaped me. Like my wife laughs that like there's two things that I'm doing at night. If I'm on my phone, I'm either writing something for like a post, but if I'm watching content like on YouTube, it's usually like wrestling with regret, or you know, or like something horror related, and I'm kind of deep diving into that. But it's like those two things, I know that it's comfort for me because that's what formed me growing up.
Always wrestling, even at its shittiest, is highly entertaining. And trust me, I'm definitely going to have you back on the show when we cover a Halloween Havoc episode in the future. So you'll definitely be coming back. You'll definitely be making another appearance, because I feel like I need you to come back for, you know, we always do, at least we try to do one a year. We try to do a Halloween Havoc episode. We did one last year around WrestleMania time. So you'll be making another appearance. I think that'll be a fun. I don't want to delve too much into wrestling to spoil it. But definitely get you back in the future to talk wrestling and talk all kinds of ridiculousness in that world, and because it's always highly entertaining. But let's talk about the main topic. It is the holiday season. You know, it's that time of the year where it's supposed to be cold, snowy. A guy in a big red suit comes down the chimney, gives people presents. And I thought, since you were going to be on the show, and we haven't really done this at Haunted Hangover, we've never really done like favorite horror holiday moments, or holiday horror moments, however way you want to say it. Not so much, and this could be from a movie, TV show, old, new, whatever.
Yeah.
We've never really done that. We've usually kind of talked about, a specific film or Santa Clauses or holiday memories. So I thought, you being a horror aficionado, much like myself, I thought we'd come up with 4 interesting picks that might not technically be horror, because I'm guilty. One of my picks is technically not horror, but also is, because that's how I roll. So I just thought it'd be a fun little thing. Celebrate. I got my little tree back there. Unfortunately, it's pretty. It's small. It's
I need to put a hat on this guy over here or something, because I need the Christmas pie is set up.
Couple of snowflakes in the background. Bloody snowflakes. I even have I've got a jack-o'-lantern back there. I'm pointing at him right there.
Okay, I see it.
I always put a Santa. I have this like Santa beard and glasses connected, and a Santa hat. Always put it on.
I'm gonna copy you. I'm gonna get a Santa hat for him and throw one on. If you see any content come from me, it's gonna be credited to you.
you gotta decorate for the time, man. So I love Halloween. I also love the holiday season. I love it all, man. I
had this epiphany where post Halloween, I am like, damn, like it's over now. And, I feel like there is this, like, not even joking, like you come down off of this like high of like, it's the season, you're doing your thing. And then I'm like, this is what I love the most, is like picking out movies that like, are horror, that are invading Christmas. Christmas is supposed to be the most innocent thing ever, right? It's like, the big jolly guy and all of that stuff and the Christmas magic. And I'm like, when you kind of like disrupt that makes it even better. So when you mentioned to me and you were like, look, like we spoke earlier, like weeks back, and you were like, okay, I want to do something. We'll do like a Christmas themed episode. And I was like, shit, that made me a lot more happy. I was like, I can look forward to this, because like, it's true. This is why we kind of enjoy it all year, because you can kind of find your place no matter what time of the year it is.
It could be Easter, and you'll
there's something.
Figure something spooky out there. But yes, Mike, since you're the guest, hit us with your first pick.
I'll come over and you can suck it. Okay. Listen, you pervert, why don't you go over to Lambakai? They could use a little of this. You piggy cunt. Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge.
All right, so I lost sleep over this, because I was like, if I go too obvious, like people are going to judge me. But truthfully, from the heart.
Judge-free zone, man. Yeah. Judge-free zone. So, there's no judgment
This
here.
is not the reason, but I'm going with Black Christmas, the original, so 1974. And aside from it being the first of many, the holiday slasher, we get like things that inspired my favorite movie, Halloween. So we get the first person point of view. We get the phone calls inside the house that would like birth the Scream franchise way before its time, which is insane. But the one thing that stands out to me, and the reason why I picked it, is that the first 10 seconds of the film, like maybe 20, and the last 20 seconds of the film were what resonated with me the most. So like, growing up, I would drive to my aunt's house on Christmas Eve. And when I watched Black Christmas, it always looked very familiar. And I was like, that feels like Christmas. And it made it feel more real. So it was kind of like more disturbing to watch that movie and be like, that looks like where I live. Like, obviously it's not a sorority. And you come to find out later on, it's not actually a sorority where they filmed it. But the key connection here is that it was 5 minutes from where my aunt lived. So I'd find that out later on, that like, I was like, oh shit. Like, yeah, I knew it looked familiar, but I Google mapped it like years later, and I was like, oh, that's 5 minutes from my aunt's house. So,
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I would then like go like look at the house to visit. It looks mostly the same. Like it's actually a very bougie neighborhood. Like my aunt is like on the border. Like my aunt had money too, but like that was like, over there, which is why it could be a sorority house. But the idea of it feeling like Christmas, and it reminding me of going to my aunt's house was like the big thing. But then the other side of it was that like again, like watching the film, you just kind of see that someone's staring at the house. And, it's probably why I loved Halloween 2 with that first person point of view. It's super creepy. You kind of see someone scoping the area. And I think like Silent Night is playing.
Yeah.
Very quietly. And it's just the house and it's just lit. That music's playing. You see someone creeping. I feel like what I talked about earlier, disrupting Christmas. I'm like, that is the most horrifying, because on Christmas, everything again should be happy and fluffy, the most joyous time of the year. And something like that is happening, and then, like I said, when you come to the end, we're back at just the house and you just know that he's in there and she's in there and she's in the bed. Dude. And that's fucks me up every time. But like,
dude, it's though that ending when Olivia Hussey's in the bed passed out and you get all the long, and it's dark in the house.
Yes.
It is insanely eerie because, like you said, he's there, but you don't really see him. You don't see it. And it is eerie. And I think that the entire film has sort of, it's weird because it's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year and happiness and lights and Christmas trees and wreaths and Santa Claus. And there is the movie is dark. Everything about the movie is dark, but it also has, it's weird. They're able to, even when you go to is it Margot Kidder's death, her character's death scene with the is it an ice? What is it again? It's an ice. What's the thing that she gets killed with? It's what is it?
I forget
it's like an ice thing. It's like an ice statue of some kind. Losing points here, but you know what I mean, because she's passed out sleeping. That's how that scene, the way they build up to that, the girl upstairs with the bag overhead. It's insane. It's kind of mean spirited, and that's where the weird balance comes from, where it being Christmas.
Yeah, I think the thing that messes me up is that I love a minimalist approach, like with any movie. I really don't like seeing who it is. Like, I have a big problem with I won't get into it, like CGI, the whole time it's creepy. You're building it up, and also you show me this character who's elaborate CGI. And I'm like, fuck, you lost me.
That person's not there. That thing's not really there.
But when you see Billy and you see that eye, you don't really, you don't see much, right? You kind of just see a silhouette. Like you said, it's very darkly lit, and you see the eye. I'm like, that's creepy. And then the shit he's saying on the phone too.
Oh yeah, he's saying some wild shit.
Again, Scream kind of flirts, but not what he's saying on the film there. So when, again, we get to the end and he's in the house and she's in the house, yo, remember that first phone call to the house and the shit he was saying? Is it just, to me, I don't even know if it's just about killing anymore. And that's where it gets really disturbing and perverse. But
Billy's super perverted on the phone. Some of the stuff he says, quite risque.
Yes.
I won't repeat it here, but he does say something. Listen, he's a crazy pervert in the movie. And then, the movie also has a weird, was the boyfriend and abortion. There's a lot of subtext in the movie too. And I think that's what's so special about it. That it has, she's pregnant and it's just a lot of drama, human drama.
Yes.
Then you've got the horror. Then you've got this weird, it's not supernatural, but he almost the Billy's presence feels supernatural with the eyeball. I feel like no other Christmas horror movie has been able to do that again. No, there's a lot of good ones. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great Christmas horror films, but I feel like in even some of the remakes, which I don't want to get into here, that's what it lost. That creepiness isn't really there, and it's technically not really a slasher film. It's before kind of the standard what you would know as a slasher film, and then meshing it with the holiday season and Christmas and all that stuff. So it's a good one, man. It's always, I watch it every year. I go out of my way every year. I haven't watched it actually, no, I did watch it. I watched it last week. What am I saying? I always throw it on, even if I'm not fully paying attention, I'm editing or something, I'll throw it on in the background.
To your point, it's it feels, like I said, for me, it feels like Christmas, but I don't know if it's even really trying to be a Christmas movie. It's obviously it's strategically set during the holiday, but it's not overtly trying to throw Christmas in your face. But maybe that's why it felt more natural to me that it's just the time of the year, and then that's what's happening. But
and then Bob Clark.
I'm glad you approved, though. I was very nervous about my number one.
I approve, man. And even like when you go to like Bob Clark with the Christmas Story, it's just crazy how he was able to contrast that completely different type of Christmas movie. Same director. That was what was so genius about that guy. I always say that, like the fact that he was able to make 2 Christmas films that are completely different types of movies.
He was flexing hard.
Yeah, really was flexing hard. That was like a real big flex, big strong arm there. He was pulling butt. And when you think about it, 2 classic Christmas movies, even though one of them people are brutally murdered. Still good.
Yeah.
I'll stick this fork in your eye. Why don't you beg Santa for a pair of balls?
Beth, say grace.
Dear Lord, thank you for the bountiful food that you've provided for us, and that our loving family can be together this Christmas. Also, thank you for not making us poor or Samoan.
All right, so my first pick is a ridiculous one, and it's not even an entire movie. It's a scene from a movie. And I'm glad you mentioned wrestling because that plays into this as well. So I'm glad how this all just kind of worked out, and I love that. And this is the opening scene because I want to cover this on the show in the future because this movie is fucking bonkers in general. It's ridiculous. But it's from the 2005 film Santa's Sleigh, which stars Bill Goldberg. So the WCW guy that destroyed everyone for like 2 years, undefeated streak. Everyone's favorite big man in that era. The guy who couldn't really wrestle but was just a presence. That's basically what
the master of the squash match.
Yes, exactly. He would destroy people in 30 seconds. And it's interesting how his career morphed into like he went from wrestling to popping up in movies and TV shows. Very odd because he is always Goldberg. That's it. There is no, even in this movie, he is Goldberg. And it's funny, I believe if I remember correctly, and you might remember this too, he was in WWE at the time because I remember he was growing a beard for this movie. And I was like, why?
I didn't connect that, but it's true. Yeah, that's when he had the beard.
He had like a big beard because they would have to attach the fake Santa Claus beard to his real beard. So I remember them saying like, oh, he's promoting, he's working on a Santa Claus Christmas themed horror film. And at the time, it was a big deal because Goldberg had finally jumped ship and agreed to work in WWE because he was one of the last guys to one of the last WCW purist guys that actually went to WWE. And it was a short run. I think he was only there for like 2 years, disappeared, and then came back in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Interesting career Bill Goldberg has, but I don't want to bore everyone with that right now. Quick, Mike, are you a Goldberg fan? Real quick.
I'm glad you asked because I wasn't. And
same
I
here.
worked
Not
at
a huge
Blockbuster.
Goldberg guy.
So when the movie came out, I intentionally did not watch it.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay, again, wrestling guy, right? Mm-hmm. But I was like, what the hell is this? Like Bill Goldberg as like crazy Santa. And I wrote it off. Big mistake because revisiting it later, I was like, this is gold. Like no pun intended, but
it's phenomenal.
It's good. So, but it's funny how much, like I'm telling you, dude, like I would go back to the favorite section of Blockbuster. I worked there. You could get free rentals. You could get free rental. You didn't have to pay for it. Didn't want to rent it. Like I was just like
avoided it.
Like, no.
You're like, fuck Santa Claus Goldberg. I don't want to see that shit.
I remember I would time to time, I kid you not, I would turn over the box because it was still like a VHS at that point.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, nah, like I can't do this. Like I'm like, because again, I wasn't really like, of all the characters I liked in wrestling, I appreciated where Goldberg stood in the industry and who he was and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I was like, he's not like what I like. And I'm like, and it's exactly what I thought. What ended up being the great part about it is that I'm like, he's just going to be Bill Goldberg as Santa. But when I finally let down my guard and watched it, that's the best part about it, is that he's Bill Goldberg as Santa.
It's crazy that it's a real movie. Like when you tell anyone the plot of it, like that can't be a real movie. Basically, and I'll get into the opening scene that I love in Santa's Sleigh, but basically in a nutshell, Bill Goldberg is Santa Claus, and in the film, you learn through this like kid and I think it's his grandfather or something, or I forget, but the context, it's not important. But you learn that Goldberg, as Santa, this version of Santa Claus, some sort of curse or something like with Satan is involved, where they forced him to deliver presents on Christmas for like 1,000 years. And this is the year where that finally ends, that curse or whatever is lifted. And now he just wants to kill everybody. Like that's naughty and shit. Like that's just, he just wants to murder and slaughter. And that's basically the plot of the film. It's a genius idea, just brilliant. And I think when the movie came out, people kind of shunned it. They were like, oh, Santa Sleigh, Goldberg. Yeah. Who wants to watch that shit? Direct to video. 2005, that was the direct to video era. And I think now almost 20, it's 20 years at this point, right? Right? Yeah. Shy almost of it, but close to. It's got a cult following now. It's fucking ridiculous. And when you watch the movie and this opening scene, it's kind of hard to believe who's in it. Like you, So let me dive in before rambling on. That's why, you know what? Let me stop myself here because I do want to cover this movie in the future eventually on the show. But so the movie opens up with this like pompous family, rich. They're like these yuppie rich people, and they're having their holiday dinner. And there's like weird stuff going on. I think like one of the characters is having an affair with the guy's wife, this, that, and the third. But the really, nanny. Yes, exactly. The really weird thing about this scene now is it's just the opening 3 minutes of the movie. You've got James Caan in an uncredited role. James Caan, the Godfather. And he, Elf, everyone knows him, from Elf, another great Christmas movie comedy. James Caan, Misery, phenomenal actor. But yes, Chris Kattan from Night at the Roxbury fame.
Night at the Roxbury.
Yeah, great movie. Love that movie. Yeah. Not even a guilty pleasure. I love that goddamn movie. And they're all brutally slaughtered by Bill Goldberg Santa. It's fucking ridiculous. The first thing he does is kick a dog across the room when he comes down the chimney. There's like a little annoying dog, and Goldberg kicks the dog across the room. Ridiculous.
Yeah, one of the first things that people don't want to see in horror movies is like the pet getting hurt, and the first person who gets attacked is the dog flying across the room.
And honestly, you don't even feel bad for the pet because it's kind of an annoying little dog. Like they were pretty smart in doing that, with that being the first thing killed in the movie. But it's like this little annoying, and it starts growling at him. And you're rooting, and what's weird is this family is so unlikable. You're rooting for Bill Goldberg Santa to murder them. He stabs James Caan in the hands. With like I don't know if it's 2 forks or 2 candy canes. It's something that he stabs him into the table. Yeah. He bashes Rebecca Gayheart in the head. He lights Fran Drescher. Oh, he like lights her up in flames. She's all lit up. Terrible CGI, all burnt. It is bonkers.
And then he drowns her in the eggnog.
Yes, in the eggnog. Perfect way to kind of tie that all together with he uses the holiday against them. Yeah. I love that. It's just so fucking crazy. And it's a good way to start an outrageous movie. And then all these known, especially in 2005, these were all familiar faces. These were all people that you recognize. And you're like, why are they in this movie for 3 seconds? Why? It's ridiculous.
I was like, someone pulled strings and like was friends within like the community, because to get like, you know, these actors and actresses to this like pedigree to just be in this opening scene. Like I said, they're not even in the movie.
Caan in a dumb Santa Claus Goldberg horror movie is crazy. It's just wild. It's just, and then looking back at it, you know, it's nutty. And that's what I love about it. And the whole movie, and I felt the same way you did. I was like, this is stupid. And I've grown to, much like Black Christmas, I throw it on every holiday season from time to time because of how fucking dumb it is. But it's a breeze to watch, too. It's an easy watch. Insanely dumb, though. Insanely dumb holiday movie. I love it.
Cool little like tidbit. So Rebecca Gayheart, right? I did a pairing for Urban Legend, and so I had her on the screen or whatever. And I don't usually I'm not gonna tag people because I'm like, oh, is Rebecca Gayheart like if she did see it, she'd be like, this is bullshit. Like, who's this guy? No. Like with a whiskey way, bottle. And so funny thing was that so she likes the post, and I'm like, oh wow, cool. Like, cool. You saw it, you like it. Yeah. And I was like, you know, maybe she's just nice. Maybe she likes everybody's stuff. My buddy Eric, who's from Kentucky, messages me and he's like, do you want to hear a cool story? I'm like, sure. He's like, so Rebecca's from Kentucky and she was my babysitter growing up.
Oh, wow.
So this whole, I guess maybe, you know, her connection to Kentucky and bourbon is why she gave me the petty, the like, but I'm like, I'll take it. But it was cool how that kind of came full circle to Kentucky and bourbon and whatever. But yeah, she grew up in Kentucky and was my buddy's babysitter.
Shout out to Rebecca Gayheart. There you go.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man? Oh, you're in fucking Home Alone again? Dude, what are you doing, man? Please let me out of this.
Was it level with his head?
What the fuck are you doing, dude? You're gonna kill him. Just stop it. Garrett, right? Yeah. Please untie me. Okay.
You said that the paint can would knock him back, like in the movie.
Okay, look, I take it back. Everything I said. I'm sorry. You win. Just stop it, please.
Let's just try it one more time.
So, because I was stressing over Black Christmas being like an iconic classic, I'm like, okay, Mike, have some fun with this. What's a movie that caught you off guard that you thoroughly enjoyed? So I'm going with Better Watch Out from 2016, I want to say. I could be wrong, but let's say 2016.
Yeah, it's past couple. It's a contemporary film in the last less than 10 years. So
yeah. So it's one of those where I feel like when I mention it, it's like a 50-50 split. Like either you've seen it or you haven't seen it. And I like recommending that one because, you know, it is one that I enjoy. And I think slowly I'm kind of revisiting it too, kind of like each holiday season. And I'll explain why I made this my pick. But for me, should I give a background? Like, I feel like if I give a background a bit,
it'll spoil it. There's spoilers. A big twist in the movie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Okay,
I wouldn't
so
spoil it.
Here's what I'll share. Growing up, I loved Home Alone. Like that was the holiday movie of holiday movies. Like again, our age makes sense. And it's funny because now my niece is 7 and she watches Halloween, Home Alone on repeat. Okay. And so it's kind of, I think, one that could just be passed down traditionally. So this movie kind of provides a lot of nods and Easter eggs to Home Alone. So when I was watching this, kind of not knowing what it was, I don't even know if they got a theatrical release. I think it was
it might have been very limited. Yeah, I know it became a Shudder exclusive, which is interesting too because the what's his name, the dude from Stranger Things is in it in a really kind of brief role. And that was around the time he was on the show, I remember too. So,
so it was one of those that I'm watching it and I'm seeing all these nods to Home Alone. I'm like, oh, this is clever. And again, there's twists and turns. But the moment that I have to highlight is the paint can kill. So, without giving too much away, dude gets tied to a chair, and one of the characters is at the top of the banister upstairs, and he has the paint can. And I remember his friend, is like freaking out. And he's like, are you going to fucking Home Alone him? And so he actually says it. He's like, are you going to fucking Home Alone him? And he's like, yeah. And anything you thought about the actual physics of what would happen if a full paint can came swinging down at your head,
someone's face.
There's paint and other things splattered all over the place. So like that scene, because it really drives it home directly with like, are you going to Home Alone him? I enjoyed, but like overall the movie kind of had that fun feel to it, even though it gets pretty like weird and there's the twists and turns and
I like the twist without saying what it is. I know we're kind of, because I think it's a movie. I think it's a movie people should watch more. People don't talk about it enough. I think it's a good movie. I enjoy it. I've only seen it maybe twice, but I do enjoy it. And I remember when I watched it, it's one of those movies you don't know where it's gonna go, and then it kind of flips things on you. You're like, oh shit, like, and that's. And then it does have a good kind of Halloween atmosphere. There you go, Halloween, Christmas atmosphere throughout too. And then when you're right, a lot of Home Alone kind of, it's almost like a horror Home Alone in a way.
Yeah. Like, at the beginning, there's like the spider walking around the house and he like gets the spider. And I'm like, okay, like you could tell like it's intentionally making these nods to the movie. But for me, it's like, it was fun. It kept me guessing, which I love. And that's why we fell in love with like the red herring and screams, like who is it, who done it, and that kind of stuff. But anything that kind of like feels refreshing these days, I feel like, especially if you're like really into the genre, if you're kind of like, oh, I thought it was going to go here, but then it went here, I'm like, that's great. And like at the end, when it again full circle, there's like, it kind of ends off almost like this like Kevin McAllister moment, and kind of like watching how everything unfolded. And I was like, this is so like what a nod to the movie and such great writing. And again, it was like really, it could get really violent. Like I mentioned, the paint can is my favorite scene, and it is quite violent and gory. But like,
for sure,
the movie's still pretty like light and fun and plays into like the holiday season. And I'd say, I think the theme between my picks is that it's not overtly Christmas. It's Christmas time. It feels like Christmas, but other than it being set in the holiday season, it's not really like instrumental to what plays out.
Yeah. It's one I want to revisit this year. I put it on for the episode and kind of skimmed through it, and I went to that scene specifically. That's always, I think it's underrated in a way. No one really talks about it. You hear a lot about Black Christmas. You hear about Silent Night, Deadly Night every year.
Yeah.
We and I love both of those movies, but it's been, at this point, it's tired. Everyone knows them.
Yeah.
So I feel like more people should be revisiting this movie. I don't think you hear about it enough. And then considering it obviously is inspired by Home Alone, like heavily.
Yeah.
I think more people, that'd be a fun double feature. Watch Home Alone, then watch this. Like it'd be kind of wild. I meant to ask you, have you ever seen on YouTube the Home Alone with blood?
No.
Have you seen those? No. So I highly recommend you do this. And also,
so they create more of what like the real thing would be?
Someone, I forget the person's name. I apologize. But if you Google this or you go on YouTube and type in Home Alone with blood, it'll pop up in 2 seconds. Someone re-edited the traps in Home Alone and what it would be like on the human body if it was like the accurate representation of what would happen if you were hit in the face with a paint can, a brick was thrown at you, and they digitally add blood and fuck up the wet bandits. It's wild. So when I saw this scene, that came to mind. I was like, those, and I wish they would have done more of them. I think they only made maybe a couple of them, but they're literally Home Alone with blood. So you see, like, I think there's the one scene where he throws like the giant, I forget, it's like a pipe or something over, and it hits both of them and they fly. And it's like what their bodies would look like mangled after that happens. The bricks being thrown off from the second one. You gotta, it's fucking weird. It's almost like a little, not eerie, but like a little uncanny valley. You're like, wow, this looks like it would actually be like if this was in the movie, it'd be a hard R. Like it would be a really violent
but
film,
I mean, that's why I liked like Better Watch Out, because that scene, because I'm like, you realize how dangerous what like all these like booby traps that like Kevin plants around the house. Again, it's fun and they're like, ouch, ooh, like, but when you're like, yo, what if this really happened? And they explore that. Like, I'm definitely tonight when my wife's like, what are you watching in bed? I'm watching Home Alone with blood.
Dude, so that's what I think about it. Like when you watch, like the fact that Joe Pesci's character, it's a Harry and Marv, right? Gets his entire head lit up in flames. And he's able to walk around after. It's pretty ridiculous. Iron to the face, feet frozen to the ground. Like you'd be dead or you'd be in shock. So it is kind of crazy how the people that I don't even know the director of the film, but of Better Watch Out, like that guy kind of took those elements, which are everyone remembers the traps. Pretty cool. Just highly recommend checking out Home Alone with Blood, though. I think you'll appreciate it. It's wild shit.
And with Better Watch Out, I know we've danced around it. If you haven't watched it, like you'll enjoy it. Like there's a reason why we're not splurging all the information. But
it's a good twist. That's why.
Yeah.
Die, you son of a.
So the last holiday horror moment I wanted to talk about isn't even from a horror film. And it's one it's horror, but it's the movie it's in is technically not a horror film. But it's a scene I feel not a lot of people talk about. I haven't seen a lot of people talk. I feel like I got to remind people that this is a thing in the movie. And the scene is the Christmas sleigh scene in Ernest Saves Christmas. So if you're not familiar with Ernest Saves Christmas, that's basically what the movie's about. It came out in, I think it's 1988 is when it was released. And Ernest P. Worrell, I'm a big Ernest fan. I'm assuming you are as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure most of the listeners are as well. He has to save Christmas. He's got Santa's bag and they're trying to get it back to Santa. And Santa's looking for the next person to take up the mantle of Santa Claus because he wants to retire or whatever in Florida, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
It's pretty, once again, silly and ridiculous. It's an Ernest movie. Another must watch for me every holiday season. Like Home Alone, I've got to watch Ernest Saves Christmas. It warms my heart. Such a great, like, when it comes to nostalgia and Christmas, like, obviously Christmas Vacation and things like that always pop up, and I love those movies too, but there's something about Ernest Saves Christmas. I think I was really young when I saw it. I think it was like 5, I think, when I rented it for the first time or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was able to understand the plot as a little child. So I've always loved the movie. It's fucking so much fun, and I always have a great time with it. And there's a scene in the movie because, like I said, the Santa Claus is all over the place. He's here, he's interacting with Ernest, and he's telling people he is the real Santa Claus. He gets arrested at one point. And no one believes him that he's the real Santa. He's just looking for his magical Christmas gift sack. And there's a scene where he ends up on a movie set because he's looking for his successor, this guy named Joe, who's like an inspiring actor, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he stumbles on set, and this guy who plays Santa, he's a fantastic Santa in the movie. He does a great. He looks, sounds, and acts. He's kind of a gullible guy, and he thinks everyone appreciates and loves the magic of Christmas. Like he's kind of oblivious to shit in the movie, and it would make sense because he's Santa Claus. So yeah, he stumbles on this film set, and he somehow sneaks into it. No security attacks him or anything. It takes him violently hitting someone to be taken down by security. He stumbles on this set, and it's like this cabin. He sees the guy Joe, who he wants to talk to and convince to be the next Santa Claus. And it's kind of like a running subplot throughout the entire film. The guy shaves his beard off at one time. He's like, what are you doing? You know, you're supposed to be Santa. You're supposed to be jolly. You're supposed to be this, that, and the third. So he ends up on this set. And the set is like this great kind of Christmassy scene. You got a Christmas tree. You've got two kids, their dad. He's telling, oh, go to bed. Santa's coming. You got to go to sleep. And the guy who's the actual Santa's looking on. He's all wide-eyed, and he loves what he's seeing. And what ends up happening is there's this like weird growling or at the door, this creature not like tears the door down. It looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon covered in moss and seaweed.
I was thinking Swamp Thing.
Yes, like that's a better way.
A very Swamp Thing creature of Black Lagoon. Yeah,
it's like a combination. Tears down the door, and Joe, as this character, grabs a shotgun, points it at the creature, and is like, die, you son of a... And he can't say son of a bitch because he's becoming Santa Claus, and he can't be that edgy. You know, he can't go to those type of measures and just kind of cursing and dropping a you son of a bitch, which isn't even that serious of a curse word. He's not calling him like a motherfucker. But the real Santa is taken back by this. He can't believe that Joe would star in such garbage. And it's really funny because there's this scene where the director, Santa, goes up to the director, and the director's like, Santa's like, what is this? This isn't Christmas. I thought this was called Christmas Sleigh. And he goes, there's no sleigh here. And he goes, not Christmas sleigh, Christmas Slay, S-L-A-Y, sleigh. This is about an alien terrorizing a family on Christmas Eve. And he punches the director because he's so disgusted, which is pretty hypocritical of Santa.
Yes.
It's a weird hole in this plot. He's upset that this guy is starring in this horror film, but he'll punch an innocent director? Like, it's a contradiction, Santa. Oh. Come on, man. Come on.
Dude.
But it's a great scene.
No, like, when he walks on the set and he's, like, so, like, starry-eyed about, like, yes. Like, he's, like, in touch with, like, the North Pole, and he's like, oh, look at all this stuff here.
Yeah.
And then watching him peer on or, like, unfolds, and he's just, like, distraught as to what's happening is the absolute best.
Upset. He's so pissed off about what's going on. Like, it's fun. He is the next Santa Claus, and it's just great. And I feel like not enough people talk about this scene. I've always loved it.
I had a good laugh because like when like I was going back through the movie recently, and I actually forgot that was even in there altogether. Yeah, like again, I'm an Ernest fan. Ernest Scared Stupid or Ernest Saves Christmas. Like, I'm like, I like these movies, but I was like, oh wait, there's like a Christmas horror movie happening within the film itself. And I'm like, what? Like, that totally, like, when I think back to the movie, it's not something that comes up. But related but not, I had a funny laugh because like my daughter, we're watching, like she's like 2.5, and we were just like watching some TV, and she was like on Disney, she saw like it was called like The Santa Clauses. And so this is fresh off of like I just watched the Ernest movie, and it's called The Santa Clauses, and Tim Allen, the Santa Claus.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, the new one, is he's finding his successor.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, cool. Like, this is, yeah, like it was the same thing where he's like, okay, he's like, I'm looking for who's gonna replace me. Obviously, much better done with in the Ernest movie.
Wow. So the Santa Clauses isn't that great, huh?
No, it's not that. But
I like the first movie. It's great. I think it's
When in the fucking, it's a show now, but he was like, this brings me back to 29 years ago. And I did the math. I went online. I was like, when did Tim Allen, the Santa Claus, come out? And I'm pretty sure it was 96?
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the theaters. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, and I was like, damn,
Time
like again, like
flies.
it hits sometimes where we're just like, damn, we're that old. Okay.
Yeah, man. Don't remind me. but yeah, man. It's this scene, to go back to this scene, and even as a kid, I always attracted to horror. So even though this scene was kind of eerie and felt out of place when I was 5 or 4 years old watching this, I was still drawn to it. I was like, what is this green creature that this guy... And then the creature kind of breaks character and like puts its arm on its waist and stuff. So it's obviously not a real monster. But in my mind, I'm like, what is this odd, strange thing? But that's what's so cool about it. Like, you know, there was a little scary moment there. Technically not a horror film, but the moment itself is horror. It's a fucking monster attacking.
Dude, that's a good pick. That's a really good pick.
And honestly, the plot of the movie... It's pretty. It sounds like it would be a real thing, like this family in a cabin on Christmas Eve, and this alien creature's trying to attack them, and they have to fight it all. Like I was like, damn, I should write that script. Like that just sounds like a fun movie. I wish it was a real thing. And yeah, man, I feel more people need to talk about this scene. I wish it just was more in the zeitgeist. More people were just talking about it when it comes to like horror, holiday, Christmas.
So
scenes
I can
stuff.
share this. Like, so I at one point I kept talking about how I wanted to do like, because of like the holidays being so like, you expect me to do a Black Christmas pairing, you expect me to do like Silent Night, Deadly Night pairings. I was like, yo, what can I throw in here that like, you know, is like, and I actually, here's what's funny. I was like, I would throw in Ernest Saves Christmas, and I actually didn't remember the horror movie part in it. I just wanted to like, I had it in my notepad. I was just like, I want to do that. And I was like, National Lampoon's, he opens the garage and he has the Jason mask. But I actually like wrote it down without even remembering that there's a horror movie within it, which is like, maybe now I'll do like a joint, me and you will like, I'll do like a collaborative post
for sure,
and,
man.
and I'll give you the assist on it, because I had it in my notepad, but not for that scene, right? Just like, I'm like, I don't care. I love Ernest, and like, I want to do this just out of left field, right? Now I have a connection. But the one random fact that I had on my phone was I was going to do a Canadian whiskey, because it was reindeer from Ontario, where I live, who were shipped down to Florida to do the scenes. So I was like, I'm going to do Canadian whiskey, and then there's the connection there.
That's cool. And the Clark Griswold, I was actually watching that last night. That's another like nice little honorable mention that's horror adjacent in a Christmas film that I've seen merch made up of him with the hockey mask, with the chainsaw, you know, and at the end of the movie, he has a nervous breakdown. So it's perfect. You know, that visual of him with the chainsaw in front of the garage. It's fucking great. I love it, man. That's another, I was literally like watching that last night. I had it on. I love it. I think I watched it back to back. Like, it was playing on AMC. It played, and I caught it halfway through, and then watched the first half. Like,
that's amazing.
I watch it every year. So good, man. It's just good that back in the day, these movies that weren't horror films had little nuggets, little crumbs of horror in them. And they weren't trying to scare people, but they were definitely referencing things that were familiar. And I think
what's cool is like, not, and we can go off on a whole like tangent about this, and I won't. But like, when we grew up in that time, right? Like, it was so infused into pop culture. Like, when you think like, you remember like, you know, Jason was on Arsenio Hall. And, you know, and like, when you think of Freddy Krueger, you're like, why was he like a household name, dude? Like, there was like
MTV icon at this point.
And it's 80s. Like, oh, he was like a child killer, and they blurred the lines between what else he did with the children, and it got really weird. Like, oh, let's make him a household name. And like, horror was so infused in that. So like, it's cool to remember those movies like Ernest and National Lampoons, where like even they're giving the nod because they know that it's at the forefront of like pop culture and these iconic characters.
And these are movies.
It's a whole new segment you got here, horror adjacent.
Horror adjacent, and it's you're right, because when you look at it, this is the late '80s. All those characters were like, they were up there with Michael Jackson and shit. So like, and Prince and things like that. So they were just as popular and everywhere. You know, I have a Freddy pull string doll that I've had for years back there, and cool. He had a toy aimed at children. I've talked about it on the show before, so I won't go into that. But when you think about that, It's pretty wild. And
Yeah.
a movie like Ernest Saves Christmas, having a scene like this was definitely the seed for kids like us to be curious of watching the more intense horror stuff at the time, you know? And that's kind of it's stuff like this. It's the fault of this shit that we're the way we are today. So
that's why we're here now.
And that's a good thing. So no complaints here.
Slay. Slay. Not slay. Slay. S-L-A-Y. What? It's about an alien from outer space, and he comes and he terrorizes a bunch of kids over Christmas vacation.
So those are some of our favorite holiday horror moments. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. It was a blast.
Louie, thank you, because I just realized we need to do this more often because I feel like we just opened up a bunch of other topics that we could delve into the future. So please keep me in mind for the Halloween Havoc. I'd love to.
Oh, you're coming back, man. That's it. Right. You're stuck now. You're definitely making another appearance very soon.
I'm here for it, brother.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. Where can people find you in Whiskey Morgue? Plug it all.
All right, man. So predominantly Instagram is where you'll find me kind of day-to-day pairing whiskey and horror and what other musings I have and whatever else I'm throwing online. I have whiskeymorgue.com, which right now is more of the merch side of things. Some fun designs. And to be honest, like I create it all, I make it all. Literally, I'm sitting where I make it all. And I make you fancy toe tags to tell you how you die and try to put a personal touch on it. But whiskeymorgue.com, stay tuned. There might be more to come with that in terms of like longer format stuff on there. And lastly, you can catch me on Rue Morgue TV on Horror on the Rocks, doing my thing over there where I kind of delve into, as I mentioned, things outside of whiskey. If you're not really into whiskey and you want other drinks, other cocktails, mocktails, we're gonna do it all and have some fun. But at the core, we're just trying to have some drinks and watch some movies and have a good time. So check it out, and I hope to see you on there.
Yes, go follow Whiskey Morgue everywhere. Show Mike some love. You're doing good shit, man. I like everything you're doing over there. It's a lot of fun. Very informative as well. If you don't know anything about whiskey or horror, who knows? Be sure to follow us at Haunted Hangover over on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Be sure to subscribe. Head over to hauntedhangover.com for links to our Patreon page where we have bonus spooky content. And as always, remember, the best cure for a hangover is
more booze.
For real this time.